Hey, my lovely friends, welcome to another video lesson with me. Today, we're going to learn more vocabulary with Christopher Hitchens, answering certain questions. He's first going to talk about the right way to deal with certain transgressions. And that's the first word of the day, transgression. It is something that breaks the law or violates a moral principle. This is a countable word, so we could say a transgression, or in the plural, transgressions. All right, let's learn more vocab.
This kind of thing is not, I think, to be excused as a cultural difference. It is to be brought within the ambit of the law.
It is to be brought within the ambit of the law. So we're talking about the limits, the bounds, or the scope of the law. That's our second word of the lesson, ambit, within the ambit of the law.
And to be judged as if it would be if it was a non-Muslim person doing it. So the surrender by the Labour government to clerical forces in this matter, and by the Church of England, is a terrible concession, a terrible appeasement, and I think the whole society will.
Okay, let's talk about the word appease. When someone is angry, you may want to try to calm them down, to satisfy them, to pacify them. This is to appease that person. But you can also use it in a negative sense, and that's how Christopher Hitchens is using this word, appeasement. So he is arguing that the government is just essentially too nice to certain groups of people who commit these transgressions. The government is trying to please them in a negative way.
Soon come to a ground. Dingle Dog has a heartfelt question for me, saying that he, or I guess it can't be she if it's Dingle Dog, is a nationally ranked policy debater in college, and despite years of debating, practice, and research, I'm occasionally stumped by a question asked by my opponent.
Okay, so this question is about being stumped. Let's talk about this adjective. When you are stumped, you don't have a good answer to a question. You are at a loss. You don't know how to deal with that situation or this question. So the person who has sent this question through is wondering how Christopher Hitchens deals with such questions, if he has ever had that experience at all.
Has there ever been a question asked for which you had no good answer? And if so, what is your typical strategy in dealing with those situations? Well, in principle, that number of questions should be going up, because Socrates tells us that the only definition of being educated, let alone learned, is to begin to understand how little you know. And it's only when you have grazed on the lower slopes of your own ignorance.
Okay, so this is a great phrase for me to go over with you. Graze, you probably know, it literally means to eat grass. But when you have grazed on the lowest slopes of your ignorance, you have realized that you know very, very little, that your knowledge or understanding of most things is rudimentary and just surface level. So let's go over that expression again, to graze the lowest slopes of your ignorance.
And begun to understand the great vistas of non-knowledge that
you have begun to understand the great vistas. So let's talk about the word vista. Vista is a pleasant view. If you're as old as I am, you'll probably remember Windows Vista. So what is he talking about? So if you have glimpsed the great vistas of the vast areas of knowledge that you haven't even touched or begun to understand, then you will develop a sense of modesty.
you have, that you can claim to have been educated at all. So it ought to be the case that I'm repeatedly confronted with questions like that. In fact, I suppose the one that is most often asked is, how can I say I know there's no God? And these are from people who don't understand the ABC of the atheist argument, which is that we don't say and can't prove that there's no God, but we will say there's no good evidence, and there's never yet been evolved a good argument for saying that there is. That's why we're more modest than we perhaps look sometimes.
Okay, so a good word that I could introduce here is compelling. So he is saying that there is no convincing argument in favor of the existence of God. Compelling means very convincing, and that argument has not evolved. Anyways, I hope you've learned at least 1 or 2 words with my video lesson. Let me know in the comment section.